Hey guys, Eckhart Slaughter here with another episode of Star Wars Versus, the series where I take two of your favorite things in the Star Wars universe, put them head to head, and try to predict which one would come out on top. Today we're pitting the N1 Naboo starfighter against the Delta 7 Jedi starfighter, as suggested by Emmanuel Martinez in a previous video. But before we do, let's just take a second to go over the poll results for last video, and that saw the U-Wing go against the Republic LAT gunship. I predicted that the LAT would win and that it would win pretty easily. A total of 2,500 of you voted, which I was super pleased with. 87% or 2,236 thought that the LAT gunship would win, 10% or 267 thought that the U-Wing would win, and then 57 or 2% thought that it was too close to tell. Now, make sure that you vote in today's video, and of course, let me know down in the comments what you thought and the matchups that you want to see in the future. Alright, so on to the matchup, and as I said, we're taking the N1 starfighter and putting it against the Delta 7, and for those of you who don't know, the Delta 7 is the craft used by Obi-Wan in Episode 2. As always, I'm going to be taking these two vehicles and comparing them in three different categories: firepower, defensive capabilities, and then intangibles. But I take these matchups overall, so just because a ship wins two categories doesn't necessarily mean that I'll pick it as the winner. I do have a couple of other rules, and the first is that we're presuming that these two ships are being piloted by equally skilled persons. So even though one would have in reality been piloted by a Naboo pilot and the other by a Jedi, we're just going to say that the two are being piloted by clones or some other people that would react the exact same way. We're also taking these two ships in their stock everyday form, so even though some Jedi would, for example, upgrade their Delta 7s, we're just taking the ships as they ordinarily existed. Alright, so let's start first with offensive capabilities, and I find this section kind of interesting because although both of these starfighters are set up to be true space superiority fighters due to their speed and shielding, neither of them really have the weapons to match. The Delta 7 was meant more for reconnaissance missions than one-on-one dogfights, and for that reason it almost seems like the weaponry was more of an afterthought than a real main feature of the ship. And a stock Delta 7 had only two dual laser cannons, no missiles, no torpedoes, nothing else. That being said, the N1 starfighter, which seems more suited for ceremonial duties or royal guarding, isn't really much better. And the Naboo craft was armed only with a twin laser cannon at the front of the ship and 10 proton torpedoes. So the way I see it is this: the Delta 7 can output more laser at any given moment, but the N1 has the ability to launch proton torpedoes, which are, of course, highly destructive. And let's talk more about these proton torpedoes for just a second. These weapons are often unguided, although you can get versions of proton torpedoes which are guided. It's kind of unclear which variant the N1 has, but we do see when we watch the Battle of Naboo that the pilots don't actually use any of the torpedoes against the Vulture droids, only against the Trade Federation warship. Also, Anakin fires it without it having locked onto anything, and it seems like during the battle they always fly in a straight line, so I'm going to guess that the proton torpedoes that they use are unguided. Still, they could make the difference in a battle, so I'm going to give the offensive capabilities section to the N1. Alright, next is defense, and this is often the hardest category to really quantify, and it's no different in this case. That being said, I do think that the Delta 7 in particular has some pretty impressive feats. In Episode 2, we see Jango Fett in the Slave One face off against Obi-Wan in the Delta 7. And if you pay real close attention when you watch the battle, you can see that Jango actually gets a dozen or so shots off against Obi-Wan, and you can see Obi-Wan's shield shimmering and the ship holding up. If you're not seeing what I'm talking about, watch the video again and see that Jango Fett doesn't miss Obi-Wan's ship, but he hits the shield, and you can see that with the little orange explosions shimmering off Obi-Wan's ship. And I'm actually incredibly impressed with how well the Delta 7 does hold up. I mean, eventually Jango Fett does pierce his shield and Boba Fett says we got him, but Obi-Wan takes a real beating and manages to continue flying. Looking now at the N1 starfighter, I don't think that ship has really anything that stands up to what we saw in Episode 2. We do see that after Anakin reactivates his shield, small arms fire does nothing to the ship, but I mean, that's not exactly surprising. On the other hand, we see that the ship is basically knocked out of space by a single shot from a Vulture droid. When it comes down to it, both of these ships are shielded with probably pretty fragile hulls underneath. The question is which ship is stronger, and in my mind, it's pretty clearly the Delta 7. I mean, I see the N1 Starfighter as kind of a hippie ship. It's environmentally friendly, it's got sleek lines and is pretty, but I don't think it's really meant for battle in the same way that the Delta 7 is. And I really don't think that the N1 Starfighter could take the same beating that Obi-Wan took in his Delta 7 in Attack of the Clones. So for that reason, I'll give it to the Republic ship. So finally we have intangibles, and the main thing I want to talk about here is speed. But before I do, I guess there are a couple of things I should mention. The first is that the Delta 7 typically didn't have hyperdrive capabilities on its own, but I don't really think that's important to this battle because neither ship is going to be jumping away. Secondly, the Delta 7 did not have room for a full astromech droid. So the pilots would take with them either an R3D droid or an R4P droid, and these ships would help with either the piloting of the ship or the weaponry of the ship. Obi-Wan, for example, took an R4P because his Jedi senses allowed him to still fire the ship while moving extremely fast. On the other hand, an N1 would have a full astromech droid, which would help with not only navigating and weaponry systems, but would also perform minor repairs. Alright, so now for the big intangible, speed, and the Delta 7 is an extraordinarily fast starfighter. It's probably 1 1/3 times as fast as the N1. And that's really not surprising because remember, the ship is meant for a reconnaissance or an interception role, but I mean that also makes it really effective and really dangerous in a dogfight, especially when in the hands of a skilled pilot. But I don't want to discount the N1. I mean, that starfighter was still very fast and very mobile. I mean, we see Anakin pull off a pretty sweet spin move, but I don't necessarily think that the ship can match the agility shown by the Delta 7. I mean, look at what Obi-Wan does against Jango Fett in the battle in the asteroid field. It's incredibly impressive. So, keeping all of this in mind, 2 equal pilots go at it in an N1 and a Delta 7. Which ship comes out on top? Well, in one-on-one dogfights, I tend to favor the ship that is faster, more agile, and more maneuverable. And this is because in Star Wars dogfights, as we've seen time and time again, any ship that can get behind another one is destined for victory. Now, sometimes this can be mitigated, for example, if one ship has really superior technology, whether it's in shielding or weaponry, or if it's got some sort of ace up in its sleeve, but the N1 has none of these things. And in fact, I think it has less impressive shielding and only moderately more impressive weaponry. I think even with equally skilled pilots and the N1 having the advantage of a full astromech droid, the Delta 7 will be able to get behind it, do some serious damage, and if it takes a few shots along the way, its shield should be able to hold up. I think the only chance for the N1 pilot will be to hit the Delta 7 with a proton torpedo, but again, I don't think they're the locking type, so I think that's going to be extremely difficult, and even if they are the locking type, Obi-Wan showed an ability to evade them, although he is a Jedi. Just to summarize, I think the ships are about equal in weaponry, though I gave the N1 a slight advantage, and then I think that the Delta 7 is much better in shielding and in maneuverability and speed. So I give this battle to the Republic Starfighter, and I say it wins probably 7.5 times out of 10. I give the Naboo ship a couple of points for having a full astromech droid, for having proton torpedoes, and of course, because the only time we've really seen the Delta 7 in action is in the hands of a Jedi Knight. So perhaps I'm overvaluing just how maneuverable and agile the ship is in the hands of an ordinary pilot. But I would love to hear what you guys think. Take a second right now and vote in the upper right hand corner. Also, be sure to let me know what you think down in the comments. Do you agree that the N1 Starfighter is kind of a hippie ship while the Jedi Interceptor is more a real battleship, or am I kind of mischaracterizing the two? Also, make sure you tell me which ship you like the design of more, and of course, which matchup you want to see next time. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching, and as always, may the Force be with you.